The courtroom was quiet, almost oppressively so. The soft shuffle of papers, the faint squeak of leather shoes against polished wood, even the whispered clearing of throats sounded deafening in that tense silence. And there she was, walking in slowly, deliberately, each step measured, her face unreadable. Her ex-husband sat across from her, eyes fixed, a smirk curling on his lips. His confidence filled the room, as though her silence was already a surrender. Yet she said nothing. Not a word. Not a sigh. Not a tremor of emotion beyond the faint tightening of her jaw. She didn't cry, didn't plead, didn't beg. She had learned long ago that silence could be stronger than words, sometimes louder than 1,000 accusations. And today, it was her shield. The judge entered with the quiet authority of someone used to commanding a room. His robe swished with each step as he approached the bench. The courtroom, already tense, seemed to compress around him, like air being sucked from a chamber. He glanced over the case files, then at the ex-wife, and the courtroom seemed to hold its collective breath. "Why have you said nothing until now?" The words cut through the air like a knife. Every head turned. Gasps rippled softly through the gallery. The ex-husband's confident smirk faltered for a fraction of a second. The lawyers exchanged quick, subtle glances, silently recalculating their strategies. And the ex-wife, she stiffened, her hands gripping the edge of the table. That single question had shattered the fragile illusion that her silence was a harmless choice. This was more than a courtroom, it was a battlefield. And her silence had been her armor, until now. It hadn't always been like this. There had been a time when love felt like the kind of quiet warmth that could make the darkest days bearable. They laughed in small cafes over steaming cups of coffee, argued playfully over mundane disagreements, and made promises that felt eternal. But slowly, imperceptibly, the cracks began to form. Small betrayals at first, forgotten promises, untruths half-whispered. Then larger ones, secret meetings, hidden bank accounts, late-night calls that ended abruptly when she walked into the room. She had tried to ignore the warning signs, to believe that love could survive deception. But deception, once seated, grows like a vine, twisting through every part of life until it strangles everything in its path. By the time the betrayal became undeniable, it was too late to save what had been. The love that had once been a sanctuary had turned into a trap. And now, standing in the courtroom, she felt that trap tighten around her, not from love, but from the legal and emotional war she had been dragged into. This wasn't just about a failed marriage. This was about everything she had worked for, everything she hoped to protect. The children, the home, her reputation, they were all on the line. And the ex-husband, with his practiced charm and aggressive legal team, was determined to make her pay for daring to defy him. Her lawyer, the quiet mentor she trusted above anyone else, leaned close and whispered, "Stay calm. Let them underestimate you. That silence is your power." She nodded subtly, taking a deep, steadying breath. Every muscle in her body was tense, every nerve on high alert. She had been preparing for this moment for weeks, rehearsing her composure in the mirror, imagining every question, every accusation. And yet nothing could prepare her for the weight of every pair of eyes in that courtroom, all waiting for her to falter. The ex-husband's lawyer stepped forward, a document in hand, a smirk still playing on his lips. "Your Honor," he began smoothly, "the defendant's silence speaks volumes. It is clear she has no defense, no explanation, and certainly no credibility." He let the words hang in the air, a challenge thrown like a gauntlet at her feet. The ex-wife did not respond. Her hands remained still, her expression unchanged. The judge, a man with decades of experience in navigating human deceit and desperation, looked at her calmly. But there was an edge to his voice as he asked, "Why have you said nothing until now?" It was not accusatory. It was not kind. It was precise, measured, a question designed to pierce through the performance everyone in the room had been watching. The courtroom erupted, not in noise, but in the electric tension that comes from anticipation. The ex-husband leaned forward, his smirk gone, replaced by a flicker of unease. Could her silence hide something the law could not see? Or was it a strategic move, a calculated gamble that he had underestimated. Her mentor's eyes met hers, a silent signal. Now you decide. Speak, or remain silent at your own peril. Her hands tightened around the edge of the table. Her breath caught. And for the first time in weeks, the question lingered, heavy and unavoidable. Could she reveal the truth without destroying herself? Or would her silence be her undoing? The tension was almost unbearable. Every spectator leaned forward, every lawyer waited, every heartbeat in the room seeming to echo in unison. And then, as if the universe itself paused for her answer, the ex-wife's eyes flickered, not with fear, but with a spark of something else. Courage. Defiance. The knowledge that the truth, finally spoken, could change everything. The judge waited. The ex-husband braced. The world seemed to hold its breath. And then, she opened her mouth. Her first words were barely audible, a soft murmur that seemed swallowed by the walls of the courtroom. But even that whisper carried weight, like the tremor before an earthquake. Everyone turned toward her, the anticipation almost unbearable. The ex-husband leaned back, trying to mask his growing unease. He had thought her silence meant weakness. He had counted on it. Her mind wandered back to the nights spent pacing her small apartment, replaying every word of their marriage, every lie she had ignored, every betrayal she had reluctantly uncovered. She had stayed silent then too, not out of fear alone, but because she had known something the world had yet to see. Something dangerous. Something powerful. The court reporter typed furiously, capturing her pause, her hesitation, every flicker of expression. And she remembered why she had stayed silent for so long, not for herself, but to protect the ones she loved. To shield them from a storm that could have destroyed more than her. It was her mentor who had first helped her realize the power in that silence. Sometimes the world expects you to speak, he had said, but the right moment is everything. Speak too early, and they'll twist your words. Speak too late, and it may be too late to matter. Timing is your weapon. Now, in this courtroom, the moment was here. She could feel it vibrating through her bones. She could see the ex-husband's eyes, sharp and calculating, trying to read her mind, looking for the slightest crack in her composure. He had spent months constructing an image of her as fragile, uncooperative, perhaps even deceitful. But he had underestimated something he never could control, the truth. She began to speak, carefully, measured. Every word deliberate, each syllable chosen to balance honesty and restraint. She spoke of the late nights when promises were broken, of the whispered phone calls, the hidden transactions, the gradual erosion of trust. She did not accuse recklessly. She laid out facts, letting the weight of reality speak for itself. And yet, even as she spoke, the ex-husband's legal team moved quickly. Papers rustled, evidence was presented, each new document a calculated strike designed to undermine her credibility. They called witnesses who spoke with confidence and certainty, painting her as unstable, unreliable, and untrustworthy. But she remained steady. Her mentor, sitting just a few feet away, nodded subtly, signaling that she was holding strong. Then came the flashback she could no longer ignore. It was the night she had discovered the most dangerous secret, the one that had forced her into silence for so long. She had followed a hunch, a tiny inconsistency that no one else had noticed. And what she found shocked her, not just the betrayal of her ex-husband, but the betrayal of someone she had trusted implicitly. The betrayal was not just personal. It was calculated, deliberate, and it threatened everything she held dear. Back in the courtroom, the memory lingered like a shadow. Every detail sharpened her resolve. She realized that her silence had been more than protection, it had been strategy. Every pause, every moment of hesitation, had been preparing her for this exact confrontation. Her voice grew stronger. The courtroom listened, rapt. People began to murmur quietly among themselves, sensing that the quiet woman they had underestimated was beginning to reclaim her narrative. The ex-husband's smirk faltered again. He tried to interrupt, to challenge, but she continued unwavering. Every accusation he leveled at her was met with calm, precise responses. She did not stumble. She did not cry. She did not apologize for the truth. And then came the twist, the revelation no one had expected. She spoke of the hidden financial manipulations, the subtle threats, the network of lies that had gone unnoticed by everyone in the room. She revealed how the ex-husband had meticulously constructed a facade, a mask of normalcy that hid his true intentions. The court gasped as she laid it all bare, not in anger, not in vengeance, but with a clarity that only someone who had survived betrayal could command. Her mentor's eyes glimmered with pride. This was exactly what he had been preparing her for. The courtroom was no longer a place of intimidation. It was a stage, and she had become the lead actor, commanding attention with every word, every measured pause, every glance. The ex-husband shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His confident composure had been shaken, his plans unraveling in real time. The witnesses who had spoken against her now hesitated, unsure, faltering under the weight of her truth. Even the judge leaned forward, intrigued, his fingers steepled as he listened intently, recognizing the courage it took to maintain such poise under pressure. But just when it seemed she had seized control, a subtle signal from her mentor made her pause. A new document had been submitted, a document she had not expected, one that could twist the narrative once again. The courtroom tension thickened, a heavy silence falling over the room. Every eye turned to her. Every heartbeat seemed to echo in the walls. The ex-wife felt the weight of the moment. She realized that the battle was far from over. Her silence had brought her this far, but speaking now required more than courage, it required precision. A single wrong word could unravel everything, undo all the progress she had made. She glanced at her mentor, who nodded slightly, a silent reassurance that she could navigate the storm. She took a slow, steadying breath. Every muscle in her body was taut with anticipation. The ex-husband's eyes narrowed, sensing the shift in momentum. The courtroom held its breath, aware that something pivotal was about to happen. And then, as if on cue, the ex-wife's expression softened, not in weakness, but in clarity. She understood something vital. Silence had been her shield, but truth would be her sword. What she chose to reveal next could change the entire course of the trial, possibly the trajectory of her life. The judge's gaze remained fixed on her. The question lingered in the air like an unspoken threat. "Why have you said nothing until now?" And in that suspended moment, time seemed to stretch. Every spectator, every lawyer, every person in the courtroom waited for her answer, for the revelation that would either destroy her or set her free. She closed her eyes briefly, gathering her courage. When she opened them, they were sharp, unwavering. She knew that the next words she spoke would carry the weight of months of fear, betrayal, and preparation. The courtroom was no longer just a place of judgment. It was the arena where she would confront the truth, confront her ex-husband, and finally reclaim her voice. And then, she spoke. The courtroom seemed to shrink around her as she spoke, the air heavy with tension. Every eye was locked on her, every ear straining to catch each word. The ex-husband's confident facade was slipping, his smirk replaced by a twitch of irritation he could not hide. For weeks, he had prepared, plotted, and manipulated, thinking he could control the narrative. But now, the carefully constructed mask he had worn was cracking under the weight of the truth. Her voice, steady and measured, began to carry not just facts, but the raw power of lived experience. She recounted the betrayals, the manipulation, the hidden transactions and threats. She didn't shout. She didn't plead. She spoke with the quiet authority of someone who had endured, who had survived, and who was now ready to confront the darkness that had been cast over her life. The ex-husband's lawyers tried to interrupt, but the judge raised a hand, silencing them. He had seen enough courtroom battles to know when a witness or defendant held the attention of the room. And she did. She was no longer merely a participant in the proceedings. She was driving them. Then came the revelation that would change everything. She presented evidence no one had anticipated, a series of emails, hidden bank transfers, and voice recordings that exposed the ex-husband's duplicity. He had meticulously covered his tracks, but she had found a thread, a crack, a single point where the truth could emerge. And emerge it did. The courtroom gasped. Witnesses shifted uneasily in their seats. The ex-husband's face went pale, his confident posture crumbling under the exposure. Her mentor, sitting quietly, gave a subtle nod. She had prepared for this. Every piece of evidence had been carefully gathered, every word rehearsed to withstand scrutiny. But it wasn't just about winning the case. It was about reclaiming her life, her dignity, and her voice. The ex-husband, realizing the tide had turned, attempted a last-ditch maneuver. He leaned forward, raising his voice, attempting to paint her as deceitful, as someone fabricating evidence out of desperation. His lawyers jumped in, waving documents, citing technicalities, trying to muddy the waters. But the room no longer listened to him. The truth had found its rhythm, and his attempts to drown it in noise were failing. She paused, letting the silence stretch for a heartbeat longer than necessary. The judge leaned forward, intrigued, his eyes fixed on her. He could sense the gravity of what was unfolding. The room seemed to hold its breath, the air thick with anticipation. And then she spoke again, this time revealing the most shocking detail. The betrayal that had cut closest to home, the secret that had kept her silent for so long. It wasn't just financial deceit. It wasn't just manipulation. It was a betrayal of trust so deep, so calculated, that it shook the foundation of everyone's assumptions. Someone she had considered an ally, perhaps even a friend, had colluded with the ex-husband, feeding him information, twisting events, ensuring that she remained isolated and vulnerable. The revelation landed like a bomb, and the courtroom erupted, not in chaos, but in stunned silence. Even the judge, seasoned and unflappable, leaned back for a moment, letting the weight of her words sink in. The ex-husband's smugness had vanished completely, replaced by a mix of fear, disbelief, and rage. His carefully constructed world was crumbling, piece by piece, before his eyes. But the drama wasn't over. As she laid out the final pieces of the puzzle, the courtroom witnesses shifted uneasily. People began connecting dots, realizing the depth of the deceit they had been blind to. Some whispered among themselves, others simply stared, frozen in disbelief. The media, documenting every moment, captured the transformation, the quiet, controlled woman now standing at the center of the storm, commanding attention, commanding truth. Her mentor's hand brushed hers under the table, a small, reassuring gesture. He knew she was ready. Ready to confront not just the courtroom, but the man who had tried to control her entire life. Her silence had been her weapon, but her words were now her sword, cutting through layers of lies and deception. The ex-husband, sensing the inevitability of exposure, tried one final tactic. He leaned over, whispered something harsh to one of his lawyers, then attempted to introduce a new piece of evidence. But the judge stopped him with a calm but firm hand. We proceed with what is on the record. Further attempts to mislead will be noted. For the first time in months, the ex-wife allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction. She wasn't just defending herself, she was dismantling the false narrative he had tried to build, revealing it for what it truly was. Every accusation he had made against her was unraveling in real time, leaving only the stark, undeniable truth. And then, as the tension peaked, the judge leaned forward, his voice deliberate and heavy with significance. I have never seen a case handled with such clarity. Your testimony and evidence are compelling, and I must consider their weight carefully before issuing my ruling. But let me make one thing clear. This court does not take deception lightly, nor does it overlook courage. A hush fell over the room. Even the ex-husband, who had tried to appear unconcerned, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The gallery of spectators leaned forward, waiting, knowing that the verdict would not simply settle a dispute. It would define justice itself. The ex-wife felt a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. She had walked into this courtroom with silence as her shield, and she was leaving it with the truth as her weapon. The battle was not yet over, but she had turned the tide. The power that had been denied to her for so long, control over her own story, was finally in her hands. And as the judge prepared to adjourn the session, signaling the final stage of deliberation, the ex-wife's eyes met those of her ex-husband. For the first time, she saw fear there. Not anger. Not pride. Fear. The same fear she had carried quietly within herself for months, now mirrored back at her. The room seemed to pulse with anticipation, every person sensing that the moment of reckoning was approaching. Her silence had been strategic, her revelations calculated, her courage unwavering. And now, the judge would deliver a verdict that none of them could have predicted. But for that moment, suspended between tension and resolution, all anyone could do was wait. And the ex-wife, standing tall, understood something profound. Courage was not the absence of fear. It was the decision to face it, to speak, to reveal, and to reclaim what had been unjustly taken. The next words would decide everything. The courtroom was silent. Weeks of tension, manipulation, and revelation had led to this moment. Every eye was fixed on the judge, whose expression was unreadable, a mask perfected by decades of experience. The ex-husband sat rigid in his chair, the confidence he had carried so arrogantly now replaced by unease. The gallery of spectators leaned forward, collectively holding its breath. The ex-wife, standing tall, felt a strange calm wash over her. She had faced the storm, spoken the truth, and unveiled the betrayal that had been hidden for months. Her silence had been her armor, her words had become her weapon. And now, she waited not in fear, but in quiet resolve, knowing that justice would finally take its course. The judge cleared his throat, the sound echoing like a drumbeat in the hushed room. Every movement he made was deliberate, each word measured to carry weight. After careful consideration of all testimony, evidence, and the extraordinary circumstances presented in this case, he began. This court recognizes the courage and clarity demonstrated by the defendant. It is rare to see a case handled with such precision and integrity. Murmurs spread through the courtroom, but the ex-wife's focus remained unwavering. Her mentor's hand brushed hers subtly, a silent affirmation of the work she had done, the courage she had displayed. She drew a deep breath, steadying herself, knowing the next words would seal the outcome of this chapter of her life. The court finds, the judge continued, his voice firm, that the defendant's claims are substantiated by compelling evidence. The ex-husband's attempts at manipulation and concealment are hereby acknowledged, and the court rules accordingly. Gasps, whispers, and stunned silence filled the room. The ex-husband's face drained of color. For the first time, he appeared truly powerless. His carefully constructed world of lies and control had crumbled before the truth, and there was nothing left to shield him. Custody of the children, the judge said, eyes meeting hers, is awarded to the defendant. Furthermore, all financial accounts and assets in dispute will be subject to equitable redistribution in accordance with the evidence presented. The words hung in the air like a victory cry. Relief, disbelief, and vindication surged through her. She had not only protected what was hers but reclaimed what had been stolen from her, her voice, her dignity, her power. The ex-husband's lawyers protested briefly, their objections weak in the face of overwhelming evidence. The judge's gavel came down decisively, signaling the end of their objections and the finality of the decision. The courtroom seemed to exhale collectively, the tension dissolving as the weight of justice settled over everyone present. Her mentor gave her a nod, a smile barely noticeable but full of pride. Months of preparation, patience, and courage had culminated in this moment. She had faced betrayal, manipulation, and fear, and she had emerged stronger, unbroken, and vindicated. The ex-husband slumped in his chair, the reality of defeat etched across his features. He had underestimated her, assumed her silence was weakness, and now he faced the consequences of his arrogance. His reputation, carefully curated, lay in ruins before the court, before the witnesses, and before the world that had watched this drama unfold. As she gathered her belongings, spectators watched in silence, some nodding subtly in admiration, others whispering in disbelief. The truth had prevailed, not through aggression or confrontation alone, but through patience, strategy, and courage. Her silence had been a calculated choice, her words a force that could not be ignored. She walked out of the courtroom, each step deliberate, a mixture of relief and triumph filling her chest. She did not glance back. The ex-husband remained seated, lost in the rubble of his own making, while she moved forward, leaving behind the weight of fear and uncertainty. The sun outside seemed to shine a little brighter, reflecting the newfound freedom and clarity in her life. Her mentor followed, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You did it," he said softly. "You stood your ground, told the truth, and reclaimed your power. Nothing can take this from you now." She nodded, feeling the truth of his words resonate deep within her. This was more than a legal victory. It was a personal triumph, a transformation forged in silence, resilience, and unwavering courage. She had faced the storm and emerged unscathed, stronger than ever. As she stepped onto the courthouse steps, the cool breeze brushing against her face, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. Silence had been her shield, but truth had been her liberation. The courtroom drama, the betrayal, the manipulation, they were all behind her now, and ahead lay a life she could finally shape on her own terms. And in that moment she understood something profound. Courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to confront it, to speak when the time was right, and to reclaim what is rightfully yours. The story of silence, betrayal, and revelation had reached its conclusion, but the lesson would linger. Power is not always loud. Sometimes it is quiet. Sometimes it waits. And when the moment is right, it speaks, and the world listens. She walked away, head held high, heart unburdened, ready to embrace the life she had fought so hard to protect. And as the courthouse doors closed behind her, the echo of her courage lingered, a quiet reminder to anyone who had doubted that true strength often lies in patience, resilience, and the unwavering belief in one's own truth.